Is Mistborn the best fantasy series of all time, even ahead of Lord of the Rings, as was voted by readers on a top 100 list? We are reviewing the first in the recommended reading order of the books, called The Final Empire, and let's see if it meets the hype. Fair warning, these books have plenty of action, but sometimes it rises to a gruesome level, so if that's not really in your taste, then maybe you shouldn't watch the rest of this review. Otherwise, if you agree with the author, Brandon Sanderson, that a good book needs plenty of conflict, then stick around to the end and hear the very important message he is developing behind it all. The setting takes place over a medieval landscape. At the top, there's this king known as the Lord Ruler, and he's in fact somewhat of a god. He's immortal and has very strong magical powers. Underneath him is the class of nobles in what appears as a feudal system, and he has given them some of his magical powers too, because in the past, their ancestors are supposed to have helped him overthrow this dark and mysterious force known as the Deepness, so he could establish his rule. The magic system is called allomancy. It allows the users who are endowed with these gifts to drink a vial of liquid with trace metals inside, and then they can burn them in the stomach, so basically activate them. One metal type allows them to become super strong and fast and tough. Another type allows them to push or pull metals telekinetically. Then there's another type to heighten their senses, and finally another main type to control the emotions of other people. Wouldn't you like to have these magical superpowers and become like a superhero? The problem is, most people don't have these magical powers. They're the lowest class in the feudal system, known as the ska. They are called otherwise slaves. So basically, the nobles and their servants can beat them anytime they like, and the nobles are allowed by law to rape them whenever they like, and obligated furthermore to kill them afterward so they don't bear children and pick up some of these magical abilities that were not meant for them. No one can bear these conditions of abuse, so from time to time there have been ska rebellions in the past. The problem is, as mentioned, the ruling class is so much more overpowered, especially because they also have these servants called the Inquisitors. They're these supernatural creatures that have spikes through their heads where they should have eyes, and they're much more powerful even than allomancers, so who can stand up to them? It's usually every time there's a rebellion, it's brutally crushed, and no one even has hopes anymore. The people are depressed walking around with their heads down. Except in this book, there arises a hero, Kelsier. It sounds a little cliche, but actually he's the real deal, for the most part. That he used to be a ska, developed allomantic powers, but he has a vision for how to overthrow this elaborate plan to have a change in the system, and he's extremely courageous, like defiant. He just will not quit. And on top of that, also extremely charismatic, that he will lead the people and actually make them believe out of hopelessness. So let's get into the themes. It's interesting how in this book there's duality at every level. There's one side and then there's another side, so it's like a constant debate. The first theme is friendship. On the one hand, there is self-preservation. In a hugely corrupt society, where the only goal basically for most people is survival, everyone will look out for their own self-interest. So basically no one is going to do anything more for you. So why should you do more for others? Or do you lean on the other side and believe in sacrifice for love and friendship? Because these are the best things in life, and they'll give you much more than the bare minimum. The second theme is betrayal or loyalty. The main heroine of the book is actually Vin. She's a 16-year-old ska girl with allomantic powers. She grew up as an orphan in the care of her brother Reen, and the one lesson he taught her whole life is that everyone will betray you. And he solidifies this lesson by betraying her himself and leaving her to the merciless underground world of thieving crews. On the other hand, there's Kelsier and his collaborators, which Vin soon meets, and they believe in friendship and trust and helping each other out. And the whole time Vin is wondering, is it as life has always shown me, that people do betray, or can I allow myself to place a little trust in this utopia as it seems, of friends that will probably break my heart, but they could also meet all of my hopes and expectations. Here's where things get even darker. The theme of nature versus nurture. So again on two levels. One, how the nobles see the Ska as an inferior species, probably not even sentient or intelligent, versus how the Ska see the nobles as these monsters that might even be beyond hope for reformation. So the question is, can people change for the better so we can all get along and live together in society? Or it's opposite and we can imagine the effects of it. And the fourth theme is revenge versus hope. What would you do under constant bullying? Would you strike back without another thought? Or would you hold out hope that maybe through softer means you could get them to understand, save yourself and them? So these are deep ideas that a fantasy book is doing a great job of analyzing. To give an overview of the characters, starting from Vin, she's alright. The problem I have with her a little bit is that she's an unlikely hero. I prefer the epic hero type, like Kelsier, and several moments where he most impressed me was where he was willing to jump into the frying pan to save his friends, in the sense that he'll never break trust. My favorite character, though, is Ham. He is known as a pewter thug. He burns pewter to become super strong and fast. So you might say that's brawn, but he also has brains. He's always asking some deep questions, and his friends call him the philosopher. But what I like about him the most is his humility. He knows what is enough. His dream is to go through with this rebellion idea, to earn a little bit of money so he can retire in the countryside with his family and live out his days in peace. And I'll mention another character, Elend, the High Noble. What I like best about him, again another peculiarity, is how he always brings a book with him. It'll be tucked in his jacket pocket, for example, and he'll be reading it like an anime, just kind of cool, but following everything that's happening around him. So I think that's something we could try, especially after how cigarettes used to be cool and the smartphone is currently cool. As a reader, I'd like to see reading books being cool. 2 points to make regarding literary techniques. The first is, with a heavy and dark book like this, there's always the danger of falling so deeply into tragedy that it becomes outright depressing. But Brandon Sanderson is able to avoid this by suggesting solutions, so he is able to find the silver lining to the cloud. Next, he also gives hints in the book, which I think was pretty neat, about his own writing style, that he is heavy on plotting. He's one of those authors that can imagine what will happen maybe 3 books down the line, and set up the beginning in such a way as to carry on dramatizing all the way throughout, which is something worth trying for any author to see if that will work for them, or if they need to write in order to discover what their book is about and then expand upon it from there. I think it's pretty safe to say that I would recommend Mistborn to any fans of fantasy. The caveat I would recommend, however, is not to compare it with Lord of the Rings, which is still the epitome of fantasy in my own mind. Namely because Mistborn is its own reading experience. There are all these great themes that we might overlook if we're expecting something else, so we should analyze it for what it is on its own. What would I expect of other books? Maybe if they look into the past, the relationship between Kelsier and Mare, his girlfriend, still holds a lot of secrets that can be explored. Or if it turns toward the future, which I think the next book will, an explanation of this magical entity of the deepness. So a lot more to discover, and the concluding note would be that I'm very glad that in our own times we have such great fantasy writers to carry on the tradition and capture the imagination of fantasy readers and future writers.